Engineers of Reddit, what's something that's designed into a machine solely because of the stupidity of human beings? I used to work in a building where the air ducts and air diffusers were originally designed to be almost completely silent. Well, apparently when the building opened, a lot of tenants complained that the air wasn't working. While it was working fine, they couldn't hear it and assumed it wasn't running. The building ended up putting these sound boxes in the ceiling near every diffuser to simulate the sound of air blowing. Could have saved money by just tying some ribbon or something to the vents. Get this man a job. Putting barriers at railroad crossings that block the whole road and not just the directional lane. Because even with lights flashing and barriers down, people still think they can drive around the gates and beat the train. I've been on scene for some pretty nasty cleanups. Because people didn't want to wait an extra 5 minutes for a train to pass. The reason an ATM gives you your card back before your cash is because you just grab the cash and forget your card. Silly humans. I was in a foreign country where the ATM gave you your cash before your card and walked away without my debit card. In my defense, I had been drinking a bit that night. But apparently if you leave your card in the machine, it will get sucked in and stored internally. Thankfully I was able to get it back when the bank opened the next day. But yeah, people like me are the reason for that. Half of mechanical engineering design is trying to figure out how the end users are going to misuse a mechanism and either hurt themselves or break something. I seriously can't think of any mechanism that doesn't have some kind of anti-idiot thought put into it. It's not a machine, but the progress bars in TurboTax are a sham. Computers are fast, and the calculations aren't that hard. Whenever it says calculating, that's just to make the humans feel like they got their money's worth. That reminds me of the time Michael Scott went to see an accountant about his Michael Scott Paper Company business and demanded he crunch the numbers again. It's a spreadsheet, so just do it. Click, you're still losing money. If you work in an office, chances are you have an IP desk phone, the ones that use a network cable. Now if you pick it up, you will hear a dial tone or some other white noise. That's completely artificial. It's just an audio file the phone goes out of its way to play for you. Why? Normally the phones are silent, but the first company that popularized them, I think it was Cisco, kept getting complaints that the phones were broken because there was no dial tone. So they just slapped some white noise on the phones, and people stopped complaining. I forgot about this, but yes, very true. A lot of things related to computers are because people don't believe it's doing something if they can't see, hear it. Also, Google is known for doing this too. When Google was being developed, it was very minimalist design, being free of flashy pop-ups and distracting animations. The clean and fresh look. Also, the programmers didn't know CSS too well. During the test phase, people would just stare at the screen and not use the site. When asked why, they replied, "I don't think it's finished loading." So the devs added a big colorful Google and some copyright info. Well, to be fair, this was during dial-up era and that it, not fully loaded pages after quite a while, happened all the time. It'd load part, wait forever, load the rest. The entire field of UI, UX design revolves around pleasing the stupid while not annoying the intelligent. A great designer once told me, never assume your users are stupid, but never forget that they are. Power paper cutters require that the human operator simultaneously push 2 buttons. This is to prevent the accidental amputation of the operator's hand. When I was in college, we had a cold roll mill. Basically 2 rollers designed to roll metal thin. Incredibly powerful. During the training, it was explained the position of the emergency stop button was such that if you got your hand caught in it, your head would hit the e-stop before it pulled you in completely and rolled you down to about 1.8 inches thick. Sure, your arm would be 1.8 inches thick, but at least it's just that. Story time, kids. When I was 18, I was operating a large roll forming machine and had my gloved hand pulled into said machine. I was feeding metal into the machine and my glove caught on the metal. The controls for the machine were on the left end, which as I discovered was in just the right place for me to slam my body into the control box, hitting the large red, protruding more than any other thing on the box, button. The machine stopped before reaching my elbow. This simple design feature saved, I believe, my arm. As it is, I have all my fingers and full strength and mobility. Only some rather large scars remain as a testament to the event. I think it's not just due to stupidity, but once you operate such machine for several years, the chance of making mistake adds up. People make mistakes, trip, have hangover, get accidentally too close, etc. There's also the comfort effect where people get so used to operating dangerous machinery that they don't have that extra bit of care a newbie would have. Not an engineer, but a millwright and work around industrial equipment daily. Most stops on large machines won't save you. They are so large and asking them to stop on a dime ain't gonna happen. About the dumbest guard I've ever had to make is on a roll stamp machine. It's more or less a hydraulic press that puts part numbers in round objects via pressure. You put the part in, line it up and have to hit 2 buttons a few feet apart, and that's a safety on its own. We had a guy who would kinda toss one of the parts in the holder and hope it was in the right spot when he hit the button. If it wasn't, the machine wouldn't work. Dude must have got tires of having to move the part around and figures I could save time and bump the part with my nose rather than use my hands. He did, apparently for a year or so. One day he hits the buttons with his nose on the part, the press comes down and gets the tip of his nose. He freaks out and lets go of the buttons, and that stopped the machine with him stuck in it. One of the joys of maintenance is you gotta be the guy to get the other guy out of the machine, and because of that a ton of first responder training is necessary for the job. I give him the once over, make sure he didn't get his head or neck pulled in, and cut up an oxygen mask and more or less taped it to his mouth so he could get air while someone calls the fire department. The FD shows up and asks if I can get him out, because I know my way around the machines, and I go get my toolbox. Unfortunately, the bolts I needed access to were blocked by his body, and the jaws of life won't touch hardened steel, so our options were limited. The press is on a ratchet system so it doesn't throw a part of a hydraulic line blows, and luckily for the guy stuck, the ratchet was just on a new tooth, meaning it had to go down further to be released. I informed the fire department it will have to move another 1/4 inch down so the press head would go back up. We finally say frick it, he ain't gonna die, so we'll just run it down and get it over with. The paramedics load him up with Dilaudid and we try to go down, only to find that dumbass who is stuck kicked the wiring for the hydraulic valve and broke it. I had to splice some wiring right at his dong level, and he's an incredibly obese Iowan, so the smells were interesting. I fix the wiring and drop the press down. It releases and he pops up looking like Rudolph the obese Iowan. Once he came back to work, I made his ass repeat what he did on a locked out machine so I could make guarding for it, and was impressed by his stupidity. I painted it his favorite color. He still works there and is as dumb as a freaking pancake, but he has heart, lol. Nice guy, just eats paint chips. If someone who makes Coke freestyle machines is reading this, you haven't worked hard enough. You'll be amazed at how many people cannot figure out how to get soda out of this giant glorified printer. The guy who helped invent those was Dean Kamen, and they were actually made as a trade-off with Coke, so they would help fund his other invention that is used to provide clean water in third world countries. Though they kinda suck, they had to be cheap enough for Coke to want them in businesses. If you see parts made out of brass, 9 times out of 10, it's designed to be broken. Basically, when something freaks up, instead of having something expensive break, they put that into break first. Also, the power plugs on a PlayStation. Kudos to Sony, nobody is going to frick that up. Automated machines in pretty much every factory have redundant kill switches in the form of pressure sensitive mats, light walls, essentially the mechanism that makes your garage door reverse and raise when you break the beam, etc. All because people have and will mindlessly walk into a moving robot machine and lose at least a limb. Working in the passenger rail industry has made me more of a misanthrope than I already was. My standard design guide for anything accessible by passengers and drivers, yes, they are just as bad. If they can't steal it, they'll break it. If they can't break it, they'll hurt themselves with it. Those little hammers for breaking the emergency glass are held there with a wire so you can't steal them. The wire is that short so you can't use it as a weapon. That ride on the train you're getting is likely 80% subsidized by taxes. That means you're literally paying less than a quarter what it actually costs to move your ass around. That tempered glass windscreen you just scratched your initials into is now a safety hazard and will cost a couple $1,000s to replace. Stuffing paper into the floor heater grate creates a fire hazard. Show some freaking respect and please refrain from vandalizing and damaging it, mostly paid for by people who don't ride the train just because you're bored or pissed off at the world.